Elna Hartwell wiped her hands on her worn apron as she finished grinding the last of the willow bark. The small wooden cottage felt warm and safe, filled with the sweet smell of drying herbs that hung from every beam. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the shutters, but inside, everything was peaceful. She had lived alone in this cottage for 3 years now, ever since her husband Thomas died from a fever. The townspeople of Millbrook had been kind at first, bringing her soup and firewood during those dark winter months. But kindness has a way of turning cold when people don't understand what you do. Elena's gift with plants and healing had always made some folks nervous. Her grandmother had taught her which roots could stop a headache and which leaves could heal a cut. But in these times when everyone feared witches and dark magic, helping people with herbs could be dangerous. The knock on her door came just as the sun was setting. Elena opened it to find little Beth Miller standing there, her face pale, and her mother right behind her. "Please, Elena," Mary Miller said, her voice shaking. "Beth has been sick for 2 days. She can't keep any food down and she's burning with fever." Elena knelt down to look at the 8-year-old girl. Beth's skin was hot to the touch, and her eyes looked dull and tired. This was no ordinary sickness. "Bring her inside," Elena said softly. "I have something that will help." She prepared a tea from chamomile and mint, adding a tiny bit of feverfew to bring down the temperature. As Beth sipped the warm drink, her color began to return. "She'll be better by morning," Elena told Mary. "But keep her in bed for 2 more days, and make sure she drinks plenty of water." Mary pressed a small coin into Elena's hand. "Thank you. You're a blessing to this town." But Elena didn't know that Beth wasn't the only sick child. Over the next 3 days, 5 more children came to her door with the same symptoms. She treated them all with the same gentle care, and all of them got better. She thought nothing of it until the 4th day, when angry voices woke her before dawn. "Witch, come out here, witch!" Elena's heart stopped. She peered through her window and saw at least 20 people standing in her yard. They carried torches and ropes, and their faces were twisted with anger and fear. Magistrate Blackwood stood at the front of the crowd. He was a tall, thin man with cold gray eyes and a voice that could freeze water. Everyone in Millbrook was afraid of him, even the other town leaders. "Elena Hartwell," he shouted, "come out and face your crimes." Elena's hands shook as she opened the door. The crowd stepped back as if she might curse them just by looking at them. "What crimes?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've done nothing wrong." "6 children fell sick after visiting you," Blackwood said, his voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. "They were all healthy before they came to your devil's den. You poisoned them with your dark magic." "That's not true." Elena stepped forward, but the crowd moved back even more. "I helped those children. They were already sick when their parents brought them to me. Ask Mary Miller. Ask any of the parents." But when Elena looked at the faces in the crowd, she saw Mary Miller standing there, her eyes full of tears and fear. Mary wouldn't even look at her. "The children got better, yes," Blackwood continued. "But that proves nothing. Everyone knows that witches make people sick so they can pretend to cure them. It's the oldest trick of the devil." "That makes no sense." Elena's voice rose. "Why would I hurt children just to help them? I've lived here peacefully for years. You all know me." "We thought we knew you," called out old Peter Grant from the back of the crowd. "But evil hides behind pretty faces. My grandson was one of those children. He could have died because of your wickedness." Elena felt the world spinning around her. These people had been her neighbors. She had helped many of them over the years. When Peter's wife had a difficult birth, Elena had been there with herbs to ease the pain. When the baker's son broke his arm, she had made a poultice to help it heal faster. "Please," she said, looking from face to face. "You know I would never hurt anyone, especially not children. I've only ever tried to help." But fear is stronger than memory, and the crowd was already afraid. In these dark times when people whispered about witches in every town, anyone who was different became dangerous. "Enough talk," Blackwood said. "The evidence is clear. 6 children, all healthy before they visited you, all struck down with the Same mysterious illness. Only your devil's magic could cause such a thing. Two men stepped forward and grabbed Elena's arms. She tried to pull away, but they were too strong. "This is madness," she cried. "Where is the pastor? Where is the doctor? Surely they can speak for me." "Pastor Williams left town yesterday," Blackwood said with a cold smile, and Dr. Hayes examined the children. "He found no natural cause for their illness. That leaves only one explanation." Elena's heart sank. Dr. Hayes was Blackwood's cousin and would say whatever the magistrate wanted him to say, and Pastor Williams, the one man who might have spoken up for her, was conveniently gone. They dragged her to the old oak tree at the edge of town. The oak tree was enormous, with thick branches that reached toward the sky like gnarled fingers. It had stood there for hundreds of years, long before any white settlers came to this land. Elena had always loved this tree. As a child, she had played in its shade. As a young woman, she had carved her initials next to Thomas's in its trunk. Now it would be the place of her death. The crowd followed, growing larger as more people joined from the town. Even children came to watch, their small faces full of curiosity and confusion. "Elena Hartwell," Blackwood announced in his official voice, "you stand accused of practicing witchcraft and bringing harm to the innocent children of this community. How do you answer?" "I am innocent," Elena said as loudly as she could. "I have never practiced witchcraft. I have never harmed anyone. I am a healer, not a witch." "The evidence says otherwise," Blackwood replied. "By the power given to me by the colonial government, I sentence you to hang by the neck until dead. May God have mercy on your evil soul." The crowd murmured its approval. Someone had already thrown a rope over the strongest branch of the oak tree. Elena looked up at it and felt her knees go weak. "Wait," she said desperately. "I demand a proper trial. You can't just kill me without proof." "We have all the proof we need," Blackwood said. Sick children don't lie." "But they got better," Elena shouted. "If I were truly a witch, why would I heal them? Why wouldn't I let them die?" "Because," said a voice from the crowd, "everyone knows that witches make people sick first, then pretend to cure them to gain their trust. It's how they gather power." Elena stared at the speaker. It was Margaret Foster, a woman whose own daughter Elena had helped deliver safely just 2 years ago. Now Margaret looked at her with hatred and disgust. The rope felt rough against Elena's neck. Her hands were tied behind her back and her feet could barely touch the ground. She had to stand on her toes to breathe properly. "Let this be a warning to all who would bring evil to our Christian community," Blackwood called out to the crowd. "This is what happens to those who serve the devil." Someone hammered a wooden sign to the tree trunk above Elena's head. Even hanging, there struggling to breathe, she could read the cruel words, "Traitor woman." "We'll leave her here until tomorrow morning," Blackwood announced. "Let everyone see what becomes of witches in Millbrook." The crowd began to scatter, returning to their homes and shops. Soon only a few curious children remained, staring at Elena with wide eyes until their parents called them away. As the sun set, Elena was alone. The rope burned against her throat and her shoulders ached from having her arms tied behind her back. But worse than the physical pain was the crushing weight of betrayal. These people had turned against her so easily, believing the worst without even trying to understand the truth. The night grew cold and Elena's thin dress offered little protection against the autumn wind. Her feet were numb from trying to stay on her toes, and exhaustion made it harder and harder to keep standing. She thought about Thomas and how he had always believed in her gift for healing. "You have gentle hands and a caring heart," he used to say. "That's real magic, the kind that makes the world better." But now those same hands were tied behind her back, and that caring heart was breaking. As the hours passed, Elena drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she dreamed she was back in her cottage, safe and warm, grinding herbs by candlelight. Sometimes she dreamed of Thomas, young and laughing, teaching her to dance in their tiny kitchen. But always, she woke up to the reality of the rope around her neck and the cruel sign above her head. The town slept peacefully, convinced they had rid themselves of evil. But Elena knew the real evil still walked free among them, and she wondered if she would live long enough to see the truth revealed. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant, offering no comfort to the innocent woman who hung between earth and sky, waiting for a dawn that might never come. The first light of dawn was still hours away when Elena heard the sound. At first she thought it was just the wind rustling through the fallen leaves. But then it came again, a soft whimpering, like a child crying. Elena's eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and she could see fairly well in the moonlight that filtered through the oak tree's branches. Her neck burned from the rope and her legs shook from exhaustion, but she was still alive. Barely. The whimpering sound came closer, and then she saw it. A small gray shape emerged from the forest that bordered the town. It moved carefully, limping on 3 legs while holding one paw up in the air. Elena's heart skipped. Even in her desperate situation, her healer's instincts kicked in. The creature was hurt and alone, just like she was. As it came closer, Elena could see it was a wolf pup, no bigger than a house cat. Its fur was matted with dirt and brambles, and its yellow eyes reflected the moonlight. The pup couldn't be more than a few months old, far too young to survive on its own. The little wolf approached slowly, sniffing the air. When it reached the base of the oak tree, it looked up at Elena with those bright yellow eyes and whined softly. "Hello, little one," Elena whispered, her voice hoarse from the rope pressing against her throat. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The pup tilted its head at the sound of her voice. It circled the tree once, then sat down directly beneath Elena's dangling feet and whined again. Elena could see the problem now. A large thorn was stuck deep in the pup's front right paw, and the area around it was swollen and infected. The poor creature was in real pain. "Oh, you poor baby," Elena murmured. "That must hurt terribly." The pup seemed to understand the kindness in her voice. It stood up on its hind legs, trying to reach Elena with its good front paw. Of course, it couldn't reach her, but Elena was touched by the gesture. "I wish I could help you," she said sadly, "but as you can see, I'm not in the best position to help anyone right now." For the next hour, the pup stayed right beneath her, occasionally whimpering or looking up at her with those intelligent eyes. Elena found herself talking to the little creature, partly to keep herself awake and partly because it felt good to have someone listen without judging. "I used to have a dog when I was your age," she told the pup. "His name was Rusty because of his reddish fur. He was my best friend when I was growing up. My parents died when I was 12, and Rusty was the only one who never left my side." The sea. Pup's ears perked up at the sound of her voice even though it couldn't understand the words. "I wonder if you have a family somewhere," Elena continued. "Your mother must be worried sick about you. Wolves don't usually leave their pack, especially babies like you." As if responding to her words, the pup let out a long, mournful howl. It was a baby's howl, high and thin, but it carried all the loneliness in the world. "Shh," Elena said softly. "You'll wake the whole town, and they're not very fond of either of us right now." But the pup's howl had awakened something in Elena's heart. Here was another creature that had been abandoned and left to suffer. Maybe it was fate that brought them together. "You know what?" she whispered. "Even if I can't get down to help you, maybe I can talk you through helping yourself. My grandmother always said that animals are smarter than people give them credit for." The pup looked up at her as if it understood every word. "That thorn in your paw needs to come out," Elena said. "See if you can bite it and pull it out with your teeth. You might need to use your other paw to hold it steady." To Elena's amazement, the pup seemed to listen. It lifted its injured paw and began examining the thorn more closely. After several attempts, it managed to grab the thick part of the thorn between its small teeth. "That's it," Elena encouraged. "Now pull steadily. Don't jerk it. Just pull slow and steady." The pup whined with pain, but it kept working at the thorn. Finally, with a little yelp, it pulled the long, sharp piece of wood from its paw. "Good job," Elena said, feeling genuinely happy for the first time since this nightmare began. "Now you need to clean the wound. There should be some dew on the grass. Lick your paw clean, and then rest it." The pup did exactly as she suggested, licking the wound carefully and then lying down with its paw stretched out in front of it. As the night wore on, Elena and the pup kept each other company. The little wolf seemed to sense that Elena was in trouble because it refused to leave her side. When Elena dozed off from exhaustion, the pup would whine softly to keep her awake, as if it understood that sleeping could be dangerous for her. "You're a smart little one, aren't you?" Elena said during one of their quiet conversations. "I think you understand more than most people would believe." The pup had been watching Elena carefully, and now it was doing something that made her heart race with hope. It was standing on its hind legs again, but this time it was reaching higher. Its small teeth were grabbing at the rope just above Elena's head. "What are you doing, little friend?" Elena asked, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. The pup had found a loose strand in the rope and was tugging at it with determination. The rope was old and weathered from hanging outside in all kinds of weather. When the pup pulled on the loose strand, it began to unravel slightly. "Oh my goodness," Elena breathed. "You're trying to help me, aren't you?" The pup worked for nearly an hour, tugging and chewing at the rope. It wasn't strong enough to break Elena free completely, but it managed to loosen the rope just enough that Elena could breathe more easily. The pressure on her neck decreased and she could put more weight on her feet. As the sky began to lighten in the east, Elena felt stronger than she had all night. The pup had given her something more precious than freedom. It had given her hope. "Thank you, little one," she whispered. "You saved my life tonight. I don't know how I can ever repay you." The pup wagged its tail for the first time. A tiny wag that made Elena smile despite everything. But their moment of peace was interrupted by voices from the town. People were beginning to wake up and soon they would come to check on Elena. Some would come out of curiosity, others to make sure she was still alive for the final part of her execution. "You need to go now," Elena told the pup urgently. "Hide in the forest. If they see you here with me, they'll think you're my familiar spirit. They'll hurt you too." But the pup didn't move. It looked toward the town, then back at Elena, as if it was making a decision. "Go," Elena whispered more urgently. "Please, little one, save yourself." The pup gave her one last long look, then trotted back toward the forest, but instead of disappearing into the trees, it stopped at the edge of the woods and sat down, watching Elena from a safe distance. Elena realized that the little wolf wasn't abandoning her. It was positioning itself to help if she needed it. Somehow this baby animal had more loyalty and courage than all the humans who had turned against her. As the voices from town grew louder, Elena closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for whatever was coming next. But now she wasn't completely alone anymore. Somewhere in the forest, a small gray guardian was watching over her, ready to help however it could. The pup had given her more than just a loosened rope. It had given her proof that kindness still existed in the world, even in the darkest of times. And sometimes, Elena thought, kindness from an unexpected source is the most powerful magic of all. The sun rose slowly over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was going to be a beautiful day, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Elena dared to hope that she might live to see the sunset too. The voices from town grew louder as more people began their morning routines. Elena could hear children laughing and playing, completely unaware that their games took place in the shadow of an innocent woman's suffering. Soon, she knew, curious, townspeople would come to gawk at her, and then Magistrate Blackwood would arrive to finish what he had started. But Elena's little wolf friend had other plans. The pup emerged from the forest carrying something in its mouth, a sharp stone it had found among the rocks near a stream. With remarkable intelligence, the little creature began working at the rope around Elena's wrists. Its teeth weren't strong enough to cut through the thick hemp, but the sharp edge of the stone was. "Clever little one," Elena whispered as she felt the rope beginning to fray. "Where did you learn to use tools like that?" It took the pup nearly 20 minutes of patient work, but finally the rope around Elena's wrists snapped. Her hands were free. The circulation rushed back into her fingers with painful prickles, but Elena had never felt anything so wonderful. With her hands free, she could reach up and work at the noose around her neck. The pup had already loosened it enough that Elena could slip it over her head. After hanging there all night, her legs were too weak to support her properly, and she collapsed to the ground in a heap. The pup immediately ran to her side, nuzzling her face and whining with concern. "I'm okay, little friend," Elena gasped, though she wasn't sure that was true. Her throat was raw, her legs felt like water, and her entire body ached from the night of torture. "But we need to get away from here before they come back." She tried to stand but stumbled. The pup ran in front of her, then looked back as if to say, "Follow me." Elena crawled first, then managed to get to her hands and knees and finally to her feet. Leaning against trees for support, she followed the pup into the forest just as the first curious townspeople arrived at the oak tree. Behind them, Elena could hear shouts of alarm and confusion. "She's gone. The witch is gone. The rope is broken. How did she escape? Search the town, find her." But Elena and the pup were already deep in the woods, following a narrow path that seemed to know exactly where it was going. The forest was thick here, with ancient trees that blocked out most of the morning sunlight. Elena had lived near these woods her whole life, but she had never been this far in. After what felt like hours of walking, though it was probably only 30 minutes, the pup led her to a small clearing beside a crystal-clear stream. Elena collapsed beside the water and drank deeply, washing the taste of fear and rope from her mouth. "Thank you," she said to the pup, who was drinking from the stream beside her. "You saved my life. I don't even know your name, little one." As if in response to her words, voices came from deeper in the forest. Elena's blood ran cold. Had the townspeople found them already? But these voices were speaking in a language she didn't recognize, and they sounded calm, not angry. 3 figures emerged from the trees on the far side of the clearing. They were Native Americans, 2 women and an elderly man. Elena had seen their people before, though the colonial government discouraged any contact between the settlers and the native tribes. Elena tried to stand, but her legs gave out again. She raised her hands to show she meant no harm. "Please," she said softly. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I was just trying to escape." The elderly man stepped forward. His hair was white as snow, and his dark eyes were kind, but cautious. He wore simple leather clothes decorated with beautiful beadwork, and he moved with the quiet grace that comes from a lifetime in the forest. "You are the healing woman," he said in English that was careful but clear. "The one they call witch." Elena's heart pounded. Had these people also heard the lies about her? Were they going to turn her in for a reward? "I'm not a witch," she said desperately. "I'm just a healer. I help people with plants and herbs. I've never hurt anyone in my life." To her surprise, the old man smiled. "We know this. You helped my grandson when he had the burning sickness. You asked for nothing, told no one. Good heart sees no color of skin." Elena stared at him, trying to remember. Then it came back to her. About a year ago, a young native boy, maybe 10 years old, had appeared at her door late one night. He was burning with fever and could barely stand. Elena had brought him inside, given him medicine, and let him rest until morning. She had never told anyone because she knew how the townspeople felt about the native tribes. "Little Fox?" she asked. "The boy with the bright smile and the hurt leg?" The old man nodded. "My daughter's son. You saved his life. The bad grain from the town had poisoned many children. You gave him clean medicine, made him strong again." "Bad grain?" Elena sat up straighter. "What do you mean, bad grain?" One of the women stepped forward. She was younger, maybe Elena's age, with intelligent eyes and skillful hands. "I am Ayana," she said. "I speak your language well. The grain your people buy from the big store, it is full of poison, makes children sick, makes grown people weak." Elena's mind raced. "Are you talking about the grain from Blackwood's warehouse? The grain that all the families buy for making bread?" "Yes," Ayana nodded. "The fat man with cold eyes, he brings bad grain to sell cheap. Good grain costs much money. Poor families buy the poison grain because they have little choice." "But why would he sell poisoned grain?" Elena asked, though even as she said it, pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Make money fast, the old man said sadly. Bad grain costs nothing, sells for much. He knows it hurts people, but he does not care. Elena felt sick to her stomach, but not from any poison. The children who had come to her, Beth Miller, Peter Grant's grandson, all of them, they had all been poisoned by grain they had eaten at home. Their parents had unknowingly fed them contaminated food, then blamed Elena when the children got sick after visiting her for medicine. The children got better after I treated them because I gave them herbs that helped their bodies fight off the poison, Elena said, understanding flooding through her. But Blackwood made everyone believe I had cursed them in the first place. Bad man makes good woman look evil, Ayanna said. Old trick. Hurt people, then point finger at innocent one. Elena looked at the wolf pup, who was sitting quietly beside her, listening to everything with those intelligent yellow eyes. How do you know so much about Blackwood? Why haven't you told the colonial authorities? Ayanna laughed, but it was not a happy sound. White man's law not for red people. We tell. Soldiers, they say we lie. They say we try to make trouble between white families. The old man sat down on a fallen log and gestured for Elena to come closer. We watch the town for many seasons. We see who has good heart, who has bad heart. You have good heart. The fat man with cold eyes, he has very bad heart. Tell me, Elena said. He sells weapons to the Mohawk war parties in the north, Ayanna explained. Guns, powder, knives. Then he tells your people that peaceful tribes are dangerous, that we all plan to attack the town. Elena gasped. Selling weapons to hostile tribes was treason, a crime punishable by death. It was exactly the kind of thing the colonials were most afraid of. He makes money from both sides, the old man continued. Sells weapons to warriors, sells fear to townspeople. Everyone afraid, everyone buying protection, everyone buying more grain to store in case of attack. But why did he go after me specifically? Elena asked. Ayanna smiled sadly. You were getting too close to truth. Some of the children you helped, their parents began to wonder why the sickness came from home, not from your house. Mrs. Miller, especially, she started asking questions about the grain. Elena remembered Mary Miller's face in the crowd, full of tears and fear. She was starting to figure it out. Yes. So the bad man needed someone to blame quickly. Which is perfect blame. Everyone fears which more than bad grain. The wolf pup suddenly stood up and growled softly, looking toward the path they had come from. The 3 Native Americans immediately became alert. Men coming, Ayanna whispered. Many men, searching. Elena could hear them now. Voices calling through the forest, boots crashing through the underbrush. The search party had found their trail. Come, the old man said, standing quickly. We take you deeper into the forest. Safe place where white men cannot find. But I can't just hide forever, Elena protested. Those children are still eating poisoned grain. More people will get sick, and Blackwood is still selling weapons to hostile tribes. Someone has to stop him. First, you stay alive, Ayanna said firmly. Dead woman cannot help anyone. The wolf pup ran to Elena and tugged at her skirt with its teeth, just as it had done the night before. This time Elena understood immediately. The little creature was telling her to hurry. Elena stood up, her legs much steadier now after the rest and water. All right, she said, but I'm not giving up. Somehow I'm going to find a way to expose the truth and clear my name. Good, the old man said with a smile. Fighting spirit. You will need it. As they disappeared deeper into the forest, following paths that had been hidden from colonial eyes for generations, Elena felt something she hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Hope. She wasn't alone anymore. She had allies who believed in her innocence and who understood the real danger facing the town. The wolf pup trotted beside her, its injured paw already healing thanks to Elena's advice from the night before. It had brought her more than just salvation from the hanging tree. It had led her to the truth. The hidden camp was deeper in the forest than Elena had ever imagined possible. It sat in a natural clearing, surrounded by thick trees and protected by a small hill that blocked it from view. 7 Native Americans lived here, 3 families who had lost their homes when colonial soldiers burned their village 6 months earlier. They welcomed Elena with quiet kindness, sharing their food and giving her clean clothes to replace her torn dress. The wolf pup seemed completely at home here, playing with the children and sleeping by the fire like any village dog. "His name is Spirit," explained Little Fox, the boy Elena had once healed. He was taller now and healthy, with bright eyes and a quick smile. "He belonged to my aunt before the soldiers came." "What happened to your aunt?" Elena asked gently. Little Fox's smile faded. "She died protecting us when the bad men came to burn our village. Spirit's mother fought beside her. Both died as heroes." Elena's heart ached for the boy's loss. "I'm so sorry. That must have been terrible." "Spirit was just a baby then," Little Fox continued. "He got lost in the forest after the attack. We looked for him, but we had to run too far to keep searching. I thought he was dead." "He's a survivor," Elena said, watching the young wolf play with a piece of rope. "Just like all of you." That evening, as Elena sat around the fire with her new friends, Ayanna told her more about what they had discovered in their months of watching. "Millbrook. Blackwood has been planning this for 2 years," she said. "First, he bought the big warehouse near the docks. Then he started bringing in cheap grain from the southern colonies, grain that had been damaged by floods and stored badly." "Didn't anyone notice it was bad?" Elena asked. "Some did," replied White Bear, the elderly man who had first recognized Elena. "But Blackwood told them the grain was perfectly fine, just different looking because it came from far away. He sold it for half the price of good grain. Poor families could not say no." Elena shook her head in disgust. "So he poisoned his own neighbors to make a profit." "Worse than that," Ayanna said. "He needed the people to get sick so he could blame someone else. If everyone stayed healthy, no one would fear witches. No one would support his other plans." "What other plans?" White Bear poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks up into the darkening sky. "He wants to be more than just a magistrate. He wants to control all trade in this region. But first he needs to get rid of people who might oppose him." "Like me?" "Like you. Like Pastor Williams, like Dr. Hayes. The real doctor, not his cousin who lies for him." Elena was confused. "But Dr. Hayes examined the children. He said he found no natural cause for their illness. That's part of what condemned me." Ayanna and White Bear exchanged a look. "That was not the real Dr. Hayes," Ayanna said softly. "That was his cousin, Robert Hayes, who pretends to be a doctor but knows nothing about healing." "What happened to the real doctor?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "He disappeared 3 weeks ago," White Bear said grimly. "He had started asking questions about the grain after treating so many sick children. He suspected poisoning. The next morning, his house was empty and he was gone." Elena felt cold despite the warmth of the fire. "And Pastor Williams?" "Asked to leave town suddenly to tend to a dying relative in the next colony," Ayanna explained. "Very convenient timing. Pastor Williams had been talking about holding a proper trial for you, with witnesses and evidence. Blackwood could not allow that." The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, creating a picture of corruption and evil that was much bigger than Elena had imagined. Blackwood wasn't just a greedy merchant. He was systematically removing anyone who might expose his crimes or oppose his power. "But why sell weapons to the hostile tribes?" Elena asked. "That seems like it would create problems for him too." Little Fox spoke up from where he was playing with Spirit. "Because fear makes money. When people are afraid of attacks, they buy more grain to store. They buy more tools and weapons for protection. They support stronger laws and stricter leaders." Elena stared at the boy. "You understand all this?" Little Fox shrugged. "I listen when the adults talk, and I watch the town sometimes to see how white people live. Fear makes them do strange things." "The boy is right," White Bear said proudly. "Fear is Blackwood's best tool. He sells weapons to war parties, then tells the town that attacks are coming. Everyone panics, everyone spends money on protection, everyone agrees to give Blackwood more power to keep them safe. It's brilliant in a terrible way, Elena said. Create the problem, then profit from the solution. And anyone who gets too close to the truth becomes a witch or a traitor, Ayanna added. Very neat and clean. They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the fire and thinking. Spirit wandered over to Elena and put his head in her lap. She scratched behind his ears and he closed his eyes with contentment. There has to be a way to stop him, Elena said finally. People are getting hurt. Children are being poisoned. And if he keeps selling weapons to hostile tribes, there really will be attacks eventually. The problem is proof, White Bear said. We know the truth, but knowing and proving are different things. What kind of proof would we need? Ayanna smiled. We have been working on that. Come, let me show you something. She led Elena to a large hide that had been stretched between two trees. On it, drawn in amazing detail, was a map of the entire region. It showed the town of Millbrook, the surrounding forests, the river that connected to the ocean, and several other settlements Elena had never seen. We have been watching and mapping Blackwood's activities for months, Ayanna explained. Look here. She pointed to marks along the river. These are the places where he meets with the Mohawk war parties to sell weapons. And here, she pointed to the docks near Millbrook, is where the bad grain arrives from the south. This is incredible, Elena breathed. You've documented everything. Not everything, White Bear said, joining them. We have seen the meetings, but we have not seen the weapons or the grain up close. We have not heard the exact words spoken. A map is not enough to convince colonial authorities. Elena studied the map carefully. What if we could get closer? What if we could get actual evidence, samples of the bad grain, or witness one of the weapon sales? Too dangerous, Ayanna said immediately. Blackwood has men watching all around his warehouse, and the weapon sales happen in places where we would be easily spotted. But what if we had help from inside the town? Elena asked. What if there were people there who were starting to suspect the truth? Like who? Elena thought hard. Mary Miller, for one. She brought her daughter to me, and now she knows her daughter got better after my treatment. She was starting to ask questions about the grain. That's why Blackwood moved so quickly against me. But she was in the crowd that hanged you, Little Fox pointed out. Because she was scared, Elena said. But if she knew the truth, if she had proof that the grain was poisoned and I was innocent, she might be brave enough to speak up. White Bear nodded slowly. Fear makes people do bad things, but truth can make them brave again. There are others too, Elena continued, getting excited. The baker's wife noticed that families who bought the cheap grain got sick more often than families who could afford the expensive grain. And old Thomas Wright, the ferryman, he's seen Blackwood meeting with strangers at the docks late at night. You think these people would help us? Ayanna asked. I think they would help themselves, Elena said, and their children. No parent wants to keep feeding their family poisoned food. Spirit suddenly lifted his head from Elena's lap and growled softly. Everyone in the camp immediately became quiet and alert. Someone coming, White Bear whispered. But just one person, and moving slowly. They waited in tense silence until a figure stumbled into the clearing. It was a woman, elderly and exhausted, carrying a bundle in her arms. Please, the woman gasped. I need help. My grandson is dying. Elena recognized her immediately. It was Mrs. Grant, Peter Grant's wife. Her grandson Tommy was the boy who had gotten sick after visiting Elena, one of the 6 children whose illness had been used to condemn her as a witch. Mrs. Grant? Elena stood up, unsure what to do. The old woman looked at her with desperate eyes. Elena? But they said you were dead. They said you had escaped but died in the forest. I'm very much alive, Elena said gently. What's wrong with Tommy? He's sick again, worse than before, the same sickness, but stronger. He can't eat, can't drink, can barely breathe. The fake doctor says there's nothing more he can do. Mrs. Grant's voice broke. I know you're not a witch. I never believed it, not really. You helped my grandson before. Please, can you help him again? Elena looked at Ayanna and White Bear. They nodded almost imperceptibly. Bring him here, Elena said. Let me see what I can do." As Mrs. Grant unwrapped the bundle, Elena saw that little Tommy was indeed very sick, much sicker than he had been the first time. His breathing was shallow and his skin had a grayish tint that spoke of serious poisoning. "How long has he been like this?" Elena asked, gently examining the boy. 3 days. It started right after we got the new batch of grain from Blackwood's store. I made bread with it, and Tommy ate more than anyone else because he loves fresh bread so much." Elena. "And Ayana Tommy Grant recovered quickly under Elena's care, just as the other children had before. Within hours of receiving the proper herbs to counteract the grain poisoning, his color returned and he was able to sit up and drink water. By the next morning he was asking for food and wanting to play. Mrs. Grant watched this miracle with tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying to Elena. "I should have spoken up for you. I knew in my heart you weren't evil, but I was so frightened." "Fear makes people do things they regret later," Elena said kindly. "What matters now is that you're here, and you're willing to help set things right." The plan they developed was dangerous but simple. Mrs. Grant would return to town with Tommy, carrying samples of both the poisoned grain and the herbs that had cured him. She would go first to Mary Miller, then to the other parents whose children had been sick. Together they would demand a real investigation. "But what if Blackwood just has us all arrested as witches too?" Mrs. Grant asked nervously. "He won't," Ayana said confidently. "Too many arrests at once would make people suspicious, and he needs the townspeople to trust him if his plan is going to work." Elena added, "Besides, we're not going to give him the chance to arrest anyone. We have a surprise planned for dear Magistrate Blackwood." The next part of the plan required Elena to do something that terrified her: return to Millbrook. But she wouldn't be going alone. Ayana, White Bear, and 2 other members of their group would be hidden around the town, ready to help if things went wrong. And Spirit, now grown larger and stronger, would stay by Elena's side. "Are you sure about bringing the wolf?" Mrs. Grant asked. "People will think it proves you really are a witch." Elena smiled and scratched Spirit behind the ears. "Let them think what they want. Spirit saved my life and he deserves to be there when justice is served." They waited 3 days for Mrs. Grant to prepare the ground in town. During that time, Elena worked with White Bear and Ayana to gather more evidence. They had samples of the poisoned grain, drawings of Blackwood's secret meetings with the war parties, and testimony from several native families about the weapons sales. On the 3rd day, Little Fox came running back from his scouting trip with exciting news. "It's working," he announced breathlessly. "Mrs. Miller and Mrs. Grant have talked to 6 families. They all tested their grain and found it was bad. They're angry, really angry. And Thomas Wright, the ferryman, says he's ready to tell everyone about the strange boats he's seen at Blackwood's dock." "What about Blackwood himself?" Elena asked. "He knows something is happening, but he doesn't know what. He's been asking questions, trying to find out who's spreading rumors about his grain. But the women are being careful. They're not accusing him directly yet." "Good," Elena said. "That means he'll be off guard when we make our move." The next morning was market day in Millbrook, the perfect time for Elena's return. The town square would be full of people, making it harder for Blackwood to control the situation. Mrs. Grant had spread the word quietly that something important would happen at noon right in front of the church. Elena's heart pounded as she walked through the forest toward her old home. She was wearing clean clothes that Ayana had given her, and she carried a leather bag full of evidence. Spirit walked beside her, alert and protective. As they reached the edge of town, Elena could see people gathering in the square. Word had spread quickly, and it seemed like half of Millbrook had come to see what the excitement was about. Elena took a deep breath and walked into the town square with Spirit at her side. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. People screamed, children pointed, and several men reached for weapons. "The witch!" someone shouted. "She's come back from the dead." "Actually," Elena called out in a clear, strong voice, "I was never dead, and I was never a witch. But I have come back to tell you the truth about who has been poisoning your children." Magistrate Blackwood pushed through the crowd, his face red with anger. "Seize her," he commanded. "This evil woman escaped her just punishment. She must be executed. Immediately. But before anyone could move, Mrs. Grant stepped forward holding Tommy's hand. The boy looked healthy and happy, a stark contrast to how he had appeared just days earlier. "Wait," Mrs. Grant called out. "Before you do anything, you need to hear what I have to say. This woman is in league with the witch," Blackwood snarled. "Arrest her too." "I'm in league with the truth," Mrs. Grant said bravely, "and so are a lot of other people here." Mary Miller stepped forward, her daughter Beth beside her. "My daughter was poisoned by grain from Blackwood's warehouse," she announced. "Not by Elena's medicine. The medicine made her better." One by one, other parents joined them. Soon there was a group of 12 families standing together in the square, all holding samples of the bad grain. "This is ridiculous," Blackwood said, but Elena could hear the first hint of panic in his voice. "You're all being fooled by this witch's trickery." "The only one doing any tricking here is you," Elena said calmly. She opened her leather bag and pulled out a handful of grain. "This is what you've been selling to these families. Look at it closely." She held the grain up so everyone could see. Even from a distance, people could tell it was discolored and moldy. "This grain is full of poison," Elena continued. "It makes children sick when they eat it. I've been helping the children by giving them herbs that fight the poison, not by casting spells." "Lies," Blackwood shouted. "All lies." "Then explain this," said Thomas Wright, the ferryman, stepping out of the crowd. He was holding a piece of paper. "This is a list of all the boats that have come to your private dock in the last 6 months. Strange boats coming at night carrying men who don't look like grain merchants." Blackwood's face went pale. "You have no right to spy on my business dealings." "I have every right to protect this town," Wright replied firmly. "And I've seen you selling weapons to Mohawk war parties. Guns, powder, knives, everything they need to attack other settlements." The crowd gasped. Selling weapons to hostile tribes was treason, punishable by death. "That's impossible," someone called out. "Blackwood has been warning us about the dangers from the tribes. Why would he arm them?" Elena smiled grimly. "Because fear is profitable. He sells weapons to the war parties, then sells protection to you. He poisons your children with bad grain, then blames it on witchcraft to keep you distracted from his real crimes." "You have no proof," Blackwood said desperately. "Actually, I do." Elena reached into her bag again and pulled out a small bundle of papers. "These are letters detailing your weapon sales, written in your own handwriting. My friends in the forest have been watching you for months." As Elena unfolded the papers, Blackwood made his mistake. Instead of continuing to deny the charges, he panicked and ran. "Stop him," Wright shouted. "Don't let the traitor escape." But Blackwood didn't get far. Spirit, who had been sitting quietly beside Elena throughout the confrontation, suddenly sprang into action. The wolf bounded across the square and knocked Blackwood to the ground, holding him there with a growl that made everyone's blood run cold. "Good boy," Elena said approvingly. "I think Magistrate Blackwood needs to stay and answer some questions." The crowd surrounded the fallen magistrate, their fear and anger now directed at the right target. Blackwood tried to claim the letters were forgeries, that the grain was perfectly fine, that Elena had somehow enchanted everyone with dark magic. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the townspeople were no longer in the mood to believe his lies. Pastor Williams chose that moment to return from his sudden trip, looking surprised to find such a commotion in the town square. When the situation was explained to him, he examined the evidence carefully and pronounced Elena completely innocent of all charges. "This woman has been grievously wronged," he announced. "She deserves our apologies, not our condemnation." Dr. Hayes, the real Dr. Hayes, also returned that afternoon, having escaped from the men Blackwood had hired to keep him away from town. He confirmed that the children's symptoms were consistent with grain poisoning, not witchcraft. By evening, Blackwood was locked in his own jail awaiting trial for treason, fraud, and attempted murder. His warehouse was seized by the colonial authorities and all the poisoned grain was destroyed. The townspeople, ashamed of how they had treated Elena, offered to rebuild her cottage and give her anything she needed. But Elena had different plans. "Appreciate your kindness," she told them, but I found a new home and a new family. I want to build something better than what we had before. With the help of White Bear, Ayana, and the other forest dwellers, Elena established a new settlement at the edge of the woods. It was a place where colonists and Native Americans could live together in peace, sharing knowledge and helping each other survive. The settlement grew quickly as people realized the benefits of cooperation over conflict. Elena became the community's healer, teaching both colonial and native medicine to anyone who wanted to learn. Spirit became the unofficial guardian of the settlement, watching over children at play and alerting the adults to any dangers. The wolf had grown large and strong, but he remained gentle and loyal to Elena and her friends. Mary Miller and her daughter Beth were among the first families to join the new community. I want my daughter to grow up in a place where